Carmen Sandiego. A lot of people now know her from the new animated Netflix series. However, you may not have known that she originally started off as an edutainment computer game originally designed to teach geography and would eventually expand to teach pretty much every single subject under the moon for classrooms. Think of Leapfrog if it was cool. Do they still make Leapfrog? Did that get rebooted? I feel like that got rebooted. It's very obvious why this game, designed to teach kids, became incredibly popular. Learning stuff is fun. I've said it 1,000 times. Schools just typically do a bad job making learning engaging. A computer game where you go around gathering clues in a point-and-click adventure. I miss point-and-click adventures. You'd go around the world using your knowledge of whatever theme the game is focusing on to find Carmen Sandiego or any of her henchmen. Now, you may have played this game when you were young and assumed that it disappeared, but that's where you're wrong. She's had a game released just about every year up until now. They were largely digital-only releases, but this franchise has been steadily trying to keep up with the times for a very long time, even deviating from the edutainment concept entirely at certain points. I will argue that if you like Carmen Sandiego's games, then you will fall in love with the Professor Layton series. It's like Carmen Sandiego, but with a bigger budget and legitimately incredible story. Because it's about learning, a game show was produced where the child contestants would be given a hypothetical and need to solve a crime, all of which was spearheaded by Acme Criminal Investigations. Think of it like Are You Smarter Than a Fifth Grader, but roleplay.
Carmen Sandiego.
In 1999 on Fox Kids, there was an animated series for Carmen Sandiego that the majority of people are generally familiar with and is the major reason people today discovered Carmen Sandiego, a shockingly well-animated series. The charm in this show is so prevalent that it's hard not to fall in love with it, and I would love to review it, but it's currently under Wild Brain, and they're very stingy with the use of their properties, and also this is also under Wild Brain. Oh no, them probably are gonna have to fight a copyright battle. I've butted heads with Wild Brain multiple times, and oh, this is gonna suck. But if you guys want me to cover it, then let me know. I'll admit, it's wild hearing Squidward.
Do you think that Lewis would have finished his expedition across the U.S. if Clark hadn't been by his side?
I asked you guys on my YouTube community tab if you wanted me to cover the Netflix version or the 90s version, and the Netflix version is the clear winner, so let's see how much they've reinvented Carmen Sandiego.
Why would a thief draw attention to herself by leaving clues and wearing bold colors?
Just because she's a thief doesn't mean she can't be a diva. While previous incarnations of Carmen Sandiego focused on you finding her, this show decides to have her be the focus and main character. In order to add the player video game aspect, they added some dork in a chair that's helping Carmen commit her heists. That dork in a chair is all of us who played the games growing up. Of course, you still have the detectives hot on her trail, as it should.
Okay, who walls up an atrium?
Anyone who values storage over natural light.
He said a little too knowingly.
I'm not joking. That kid is named Player, and it's not Carmen flirting with him. Literally the player of the video game. Kind of like how in Tron they called the people using the computer users. In the 90s show, pretty much every second you'd be getting a fun little fact that would help them solve the puzzle or clues, but the Netflix series decided to have it be more narrative-focused, where the trivia detective work is added in only at specific times when it's appropriate. I'll admit, the 90s version made me feel smart, just because I felt like I was being forcibly injected with knowledge. This is fleshing out the origin of Carmen, where she originally worked for the evil organization Vile, pulling from the video games. And Carmen is being followed by the ghosts of her past. It feels like watching a real super spy mystery story. Tying it in with why Carmen knows so many different things from all around the world. She was born into the world of villainy, abandoned, then adopted by Vile. The campus of crime is literally her home. Eventually, a call to action by a mysterious player intertwined her life, and Player hacking Vile's system is how they met. I'll admit, Carmen being taught culture rather than experience it is a little disappointing. I know she experiences it eventually, which makes it fine, and this origin works too well to pass it up, so The main cast of characters, or villains, are all of Carmen's old team while they were training in the academy, all of them with different skills and personality traits. For some reason, even though Carmen had the best training, She wasn't able to graduate. It's like Rapunzel Mission Impossible. It's obvious that one instructor didn't like her and failed her regardless of the fact that she's the best in her class. Instead of letting a man prevent her from reaching her goal, she decides to go AWOL, the student becoming the master. Strong, independent woman finally breaking out and escaping the island for the first time in her life.
Casablanca. I'm in Morocco. I made it to the real world.
Adorably, it's actually an archaeologist that convinces Carmen that ancient relics really belong to the public. The real value isn't monetary, but rather the knowledge that it holds about our past.
It belongs in a museum!
The murder part convinces her that Vile is actually, like, bad and stuff. Maybe her classmates are also bad, maybe. Bummer, having a conscience and all that. Hard to do crime when you, like, care.
Now hear the true name of Vile. Villains International League of Evil.
So Vile being the acronym wasn't enough to tip you off? Really? Carmen's goal is actually to steal everything back from Vile, which is what her crime spree has been about. She's sort of like Robin Hood, but more specifically, the biggest thorn in Vile's side. What surprises me is that in the previous incarnations, the franchise has usually been goofy. There's always been an air of unseriousness to the whole thing. This version takes it seriously in literally every regard. There isn't anyone named MT Pockets here, and though this is awesome, I was expecting that unserious angle. Vile ended up making their biggest enemy. Carmen, now being an anti-hero, is so smart when making her the main character. You have a femme fatale that's way more interesting than Robin Hood. This sort of super spy setup is something that we have seen in previous, movies. However, since spy movies have somewhat subsided ever since the rise of comic book movies and fantasy movies, it's really nice that we get to experience this again, even if it's something we've seen before. It's just a solid setup. It's honestly kind of sucked how the femme fatale role hasn't been popular in recent history, and every case we see of the femme fatale is cast by the wayside for more mainline series like Mission Impossible and James Bond. Carmen Sandiego does the best job filling the empty throne of modern femme fatale series. Here we see that Carmen has created her own spy team during the years she's been away from Vile. In the beginning of the episodes, we get a rundown of fun facts about whatever country they're going to visit, and we'll use that information throughout the episode to push the plot forward. So we're still instilling the educational aspect of the series. I'm pretty critical of the hacker trope because real hacking is usually really slow and boring. They make it seem cool and high-tech, and that's to make the show progress faster than it actually would. I'm willing to overlook it since it is incredibly convenient to make the pacing keep on track, but it still irks me in the back of my mind.
Why would they go through all the trouble of engineering some crazy food shortage crisis?
To force a hungry population to buy Vile brand instant imitation rice at inflated prices, no doubt.
Now that's cool. We're not just adding fun facts, we're also adding world politics and macroeconomics to explain the motive of the evil organization. It just feels so mature. Like, this is clearly made to appeal to kids and adults alike.
You know the rules. Nothing must seem out of the ordinary.
You do realize that means risking another surprise visit by Fedora the Explorer.
Okay, it may not be a jokey, unserious vibe, but the jokes are appreciated.
Dr. Bellum?
There it is, thank you. I always got Phoenix Wright vibes from Carmen Sandiego. Oh, but that's not all. Now there's a third group, the Feds, who is after both Carmen and Vile, but mostly Vile, led by an Amanda Waller-type character. They've been trying to catch Vile since before Carmen. They know Carmen has info, and Carmen is their best bet to stopping Vile.
Arrangements have been made with your former superiors. You're not a gumshoe anymore. Welcome to Acme.
Acme? So you're the one that keeps making those anvils dropping on the coyote's head. The thing I love about super spy stories is that it's one of the few genres where being incredibly academic is nothing but useful. Needing to understand a culture, a people, a society requires a lot of studying. It can literally mean the difference between life and death if you do anything out of line. Depending on where you are, it's very important to ask for 3 drinks like this, or like this. Because if you do the wrong one in the wrong place, people will know where you're from. Also, tangent, doing, I don't know if it's the American 3 or just, you know, a specific area 3, this 3 where your pinky and your thumb are together, this is hard for me. It hurts to do it. I'm not joking. And so when I was 3 years old and people would go, so how old are you? I would go, I'm 3 every time. And I've learned that this is, can mean something else. So I'm trying really hard to learn the thumb 3, where it's just the thumb, index, and middle finger. But reprogramming something ever since I was 3 years old is very hard.
A harsh reminder that we live in a world where villains may not always look like villains, nor heroes like heroes.
Bro, I swear they just grabbed Amanda Waller and threw her into the show. Very quickly, we see how daunting Vile is as an organization. As Carmen is scoping out an opera house, she runs into her old partner, Gray, but he doesn't remember her. He works at the opera house and is just kicking her out, doing his job. Vile wiped his memory for failing to capture Carmen and getting caught by the police.
You mentioned having a bad memory.
Got a little jolt, as we Sparkies say. Complete blackout, long hospital stay, blah blah. There's more than an entire year of my life I can't remember.
The character of the player is used as an easy hacker man to get the plot moving, but really his practical skill is how good at research he is, able to quickly take small information, use search engines and critical thinking to connect dots until he finds a likely answer that would help him with stopping Vile. Unable to solve everything with only what the show or the game gives you, you need to use outside resources in order to get the job done. The character of the player, that being you and me, sort of technically, has just been a staple in Carmen Sandiego in just about every iteration. Keeping the heart of what the games were about still present in this show, even with the stark departure that they were doing from its inception, is very heartwarming. They clearly still want to instill a little bit of learning, some critical thinking, some research as a basis for this show. I know friends who find research fun now. One example being me. Doing research for these videos can be really rewarding, especially when there's like a lot of drama and spiciness to dig up. And if you want to practice critical thinking, just try programming. Oh my gosh, I'm not joking. You will learn critical thinking very fast. The show is episodic with overarching narrative pieces that accompany the episodic stories, which funny enough is a little rare for a streaming service show. Usually they keep it all as one big story, not little stories with a bigger overarching story. It's refreshing having a streaming show do the episodic approach given how rare it is. You only really see that on traditional TV channels, and I don't have cable, so I can't really watch those. I used to think one narrative was superior to an episodic approach, but I think Carmen Sandiego works better episodic. We want to cover a lot of locations around the world. It would have felt episodic regardless of what narrative approach you're doing. This was probably the smartest choice. Surprisingly, we aren't just moving on from Gray. Carmen still feels connected to Gray and wants to get to know the new him. But Player convinces her that Vile is still at play here and she may be exposing herself to danger regardless.
I can't let Vile see me with him. But not for my safety. For his. For whatever strange reason, Gray has a fresh start now. And having Carmen Sandiego back in his life would only complicate that.
That tiny little addition at the end of this episode is what makes the difference between a cool story and a deep story. They aren't forgetting Carmen's character when writing the plot. If they brushed Gray under the rug, I wouldn't have noticed, but having her choose to leave him makes it bittersweet, connects it back to her past, and shows Carmen having agency with her choices. They made sure it was Carmen that made this decision, not the writers. It doesn't really surprise me how well done the writing is since the creator is Dwayne Capy. I really hope I'm pronouncing that last name right. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing the first name right. I've only ever read his name, whom of which previously worked on shows like Jackie Chan Adventures, Transformers Prime, and the 2004 The Batman. all of which are standout cartoon series that brought a very unique tone and very character-focused writing. What's great is that a lot of YouTubers and content creators have learned how to make history lessons engaging primarily by telling a story, and so it was easy to use what content creators did in this show, using animatics and light animations to illustrate the concept and only hitting the key points so that the people don't get bored. Since Gray is out of the show, they don't waste time replacing the stock of villains with a new addition, Paper Star, who uses origami to make shurikens.
I see you haven't lost your touch.
Red is a smart color for you. It will hide the stains.
She clearly has the inspiration of Harley Quinn. The two-toned hair and playful nature while also being deadly, but leaning into the avant-garde Harajuku fashion to lean into the ethnic background of her character and weaponry, taking something old and having the character be modern.
They can only divulge so much information.
Well, don't sweat yet, Red.
Oh, man, I forgot about fidget spinners. Remember when that was big money and then fell off hard? It was a weirdly invading trend and an ill omen to how fast trends would be today and how much money there is to leech off of trend worshippers. The Inspector is largely just comedy relief at this point with his incredible incompetence, letting Carmen learn about the Acme organization that's tailing her. Julie is the one that's actually good at her job, but is cast by the wayside because the inspector is louder than her. Paper Star is one of those characters that's fun to watch because she's just demented to her core. Gray had the whole angle of being part of Carmen's troubled past, but Paper Star is an actual threat that's okay with hurting, sometimes just for fun, making the stakes feel greater and is a welcome addition to the show. Sometimes we just love a bad bitch. The only thing that reduces the tension is that Carmen always successfully foils Vile at the end of every episode, creating a formula that we expect, and so we know that things will work out in the end. The villains need a win to really amp things up. That win being how Paper Star managed to swipe the Acme ID card from Carmen that she stole from the inspector. Now everyone knows about Acme. Fun fact, did you know Acme was adopted by actual companies? The idea is that when you're looking through the yellow pages, and since it's alphabetized, it was, you were a lot more likely to stand out and be at the very top, at the very front, if you had Acme at the very beginning of the name of your company. Now, for some of you who may be watching this video that don't know what the yellow pages are, it's like searching up what a company is, but it's like all the companies are just printed out in a book with all their phone numbers. It was before search engines, and the rumor that Acme stood for a company making everything was spreading. So Acme is both a fake company and then it became a real company, a lot of real companies. When it comes to a character arc, the only real semblance of a character arc is when Carmen was trying to snatch $1 from the coat of one of her teachers and couldn't. She suspects it's because there was never $1 and was set up to fail while everyone else was able to find the dollar.
The coat was empty, wasn't it?
Oh boy, you're having that dream again, aren't you?
So we see Carmen trying to get a $10 million stamp from Tigress, mimicking the same test as before. Only this time, Carmen was able to prove to herself that she does have the skills needed to take down Vile and be the grandmaster thief she knows she can be. Other than that, there isn't really a character arc set up for Carmen.
Like I need your stamp of approval anyway.
Season 1 caps off with Vile using the information from the Acme card to learn the identity of the Inspector. Thankfully, the Inspector gets chewed out and his partner gets the praise she deserves. Sadly, she is sympathetic to the Inspector. Thankfully, they have a scrap between them concerning whether or not Carmen Sandiego is a villain or not, and Julie believes she isn't.
And she is out there somewhere, no doubt planning something nefarious at this very moment.
Shadowsan and the coach decide they'll be going together in order to bring in Carmen. It doesn't take long for the Inspector to get captured. Even though I don't much care for truth serums or their high-tech equivalent, it does create tension as they have to act fast before the inspector tells them everything he knows about Acme and Carmen. Even though one of them could chase Carmen while the other one gets the truth, they decide to both go because the coach has an ego. Sure, yeah, very smart, evil villains. I mean, I understand that the coach is also upset because Carmen betrayed the family and Coach is the one who raised her. I'm just saying, you could be putting your feelings aside and get a lot more out of this, but we can't expect emotional people to think rationally. Carmen manages to get to the inspector while Zach and Ivy are acting as bait. He does the one smart thing he's done in this whole show, and now the head of Acme knows the face of Carmen Sandiego, and that the inspector needs help. Coach manages to best her and starts suffocating her just before she's saved by Shadowsan, and he even helps her escape. Now, the previous sequence makes more sense.
Being trapped in a cell would far more easily allow Vile to reach us?
Reach us?
Can you not see that we are in this together now?
Having a heart-to-heart, turns out Shadowsan intentionally failed her because he didn't want her to be a villain. The old softy actually cared more than anyone else.
I never fathomed that you would dedicate your life to destroying Vile, which complicated things for me, to say the least.
Because the only person with the inspector was Carmen, Acme assumes Carmen is the reason the inspector was captured and tortured. A full circle tying into Carmen's past, Season 1 not only gives her origin story, but supplies a twist that I didn't see coming, and leaves a bold new direction for Season 2. Season 1 was so well done, I'm a little scared. It created a pretty lofty bar for them to reach. The dollar in the coat wasn't supposed to be used as a character arc, but rather the basis of a twist, which if you don't have a character arc, a twist is a really good supplement. Knowing that Shadowsan helped Carmen escape Vile back when she was younger does kind of take away the feeling of Carmen being strong and independent, but not enough to where it really hurts her character, which is what I was scared of. And I love how smart they set up this twist. We'd assume that Coach was the one raising her, and to a lot of extent she was, because, you know, motherly instinct. Coach is a woman. If anyone were to save Carmen, it would be her. But we had an unreliable narrator. It was really Shadowsan who found Carmen. Thus, the emotional trappings of parenthood ensued. And we didn't have any reason to believe that Shadowsan was anything other than a blatantly strict teacher, leaning into our assumptions and stereotypes of the strict Japanese sensei. The overbearing mindset for success is something that we've seen time and time again, but that's what makes the twist even better, because culturally, family is like super important in Japan, typically for blood-related people, but that's not entirely relevant in this situation. I mean, if you played Fire Emblem Fates, you would know that the entire premise is found family versus blood family, and for Americans, it's very easy to choose found family because that's your family, but it has a bit more weight in Japan because blood family is also very big important. The point is they used our subconscious and what we would assume about the sensei. They used that against us in order to deliver the twist. This season was a masterclass in creating a hook where it leaves the audience foaming for more, foaming at the mouth for more. However, in other news, before I continue, during the creating of this video, this channel reached 500,000 subscribers. I didn't have anything planned for this. And honestly, I don't really know how to thank you guys. I kind of been staring at the subscriber count to go up to 500,000 for so long, I forgot I was waiting for it to reach 500,000. One thing I saw some people do was saying that they'll commission artwork of either themselves or possibly my avatar, if you're a furry, hire them and hire an artist and have you guys vote and choose what happens or what is being done. Do you want Sonic negative legend Mpreg? Do you want me turning into like a Winx fairy transformation Sailor Moon thing? Do you want me getting railed by a neon green wolf furry thing? Maybe, please, possibly. Also, if this is the route we want to go, then I'm going to also be making and selling prints and stickers of the artwork I commission. I'm thinking I would do several commissions just so that we cover a lot of bases. I get the sense that this wouldn't really appeal to you guys that much, so I'm gonna keep generating ideas and also leave suggestions in the comments below. And if that happens to be the most popular suggestion, then I'll just start a vote. The point is, thank you guys. It feels really weird knowing that there's so many people out there that enjoy my stuff. Remember when this channel was about card games? Do you like flashbacks? No? Well, you're getting them anyway.
True, old Stoneface would never be my first choice, but he's still family, and you don't betray family.
Oh my. Do I sense a theme going around? The inspector is in a coma, and I hope he stays that way. Julia needs some solo work. I know she believes in her partner, like family. Oh man. And I guess also she needs his testimony to prove Carmen didn't hurt him or whatever.
But what about Argentina? The part you were too young to remember? Did he really just happen to find you?
For all you know, he stole you for a ransom.
Be careful with that mindset, player. Keep doing that and you'll be obsessing over a high school student who may or may not have magic death powers. You are already in a chair all the time. I haven't seen you go outside of that chair. Is player going to do anything else in this show? The inspector wakes up, much to my dismay. How did you know he would wake up right now? I don't care how professional you are, that's sorcery. Guess what? The inspector can't remember much of anything other than Carmen. And he's been fired, thank goodness. Now Zach and Ivy are going to need to step in for comedy relief. Season 2 moves away from the episodic nature that Season 1 had and is now focusing on the complicated relationship between Carmen and Shadowsan and the panic that Vile is now experiencing. Shadowsan is now basically doing the same thing Carmen is doing largely by himself until him and Carmen cross paths. Shadowsan seems to be several steps ahead of Carmen, having to disappear to do his own thing as he's apparently been working to undermine Vile since the beginning. He's been playing the long game for such a long time that we can't be privy to what he's actually up to, otherwise his plans will fail. It feels like Carmen is becoming a piece to an even bigger game.
Again with blowing my cover? I was invisible to them.
You could have stayed invisible. They only knew Carmen was there. You're the one who announced yourself.
It's a rock.
A bank account has been opened for a community fund.
That is a lot of money.
Listen, I know this is them being the good guys helping the poor, but if this happened to me, I wouldn't know what to do with a precious uncut gemstone. Who do you sell that to? I doubt I can just go to Jared and pawn it off to them. How would they know what to do with it? Glad there's a bank account for them too. I guess the incredibly valuable gemstone is just a keepsake now. Shadowsan is officially part of the crew. Not only that, but he opens up about how much respect he has for Carmen and how she managed to do what he always wanted. It's nice to see a vulnerable man.
That face belongs to one of the two operatives your former partner ID'd. He seemed pretty darn chummy with Carmen Sandiego.
Surprisingly, this show has a heavy emphasis on action, which, as I mentioned in my older video about why action cartoons fail, this drives up the cost of a show by a lot. Having to do several different sequences, multiple background shots of all different angles. Certain elements of animation become easier, but several more become harder, which is why these kinds of animated series can only really exist on streaming services with smaller episode counts now. Now that Shadowsan is a main character, we need to flesh him out, and what better way than the classic flashback. Shadowsan was actually a lot like Carmen, angry, wanting more out of life, and willing to do anything to get it, eventually joining the Yakuza, showcasing his skills as a thief. Thus, how he got his iconic sword. And in classic anime fashion, he betrayed his brother, who never wanted his brother to go on this dark path. I know these story beats are played to death, but dang, they're just so cool. Tangent, you ever notice how much easier it is to get away with blades and swords in cartoons? Guns amp it up to a whole new age demographic, but swords? Well, that's not that bad, which makes Japan a great setting since guns are either outlawed or restricted depending on the situation, and there's a heavy interest with swords, especially with the Yakuza, as a form of lethal weaponry, along with a previous daimyo who trying to restrict swords a long time ago and melting them all down. There's also a strong history and connection with swords. I just think swords are cool! This episode actually has a lot of historical attributes of Japan that they aren't divulging, which makes me pretty happy as someone who sees what they're doing, and how Carmen Sandiego has an emphasis on history and geography. I do somewhat wish they elaborated on this history in the show, but I understand why they didn't.
Yes, you're fading. The toxins currently coursing through your veins mimic those of the pufferfish, which paralyzes its victims.
Much like how the pufferfish is a delicacy for sashimi and is one of the most difficult fish to cut, given that if done wrong, you will kill the person you're serving it to by the poison. It's been a heavily regulated fish and has been consumed in Japan for centuries. Capping off Shadowsan's story, he returns the sword he stole when he was young and apologizes to his brother for his past behavior, prostrating himself and then being left without a word.
I'm not sure what's worse, not knowing your own family or not being able to return to the family you know. Shadowsan chose a road, and there's no turning back.
Now we have an understanding of why Shadowsan decided to bring Carmen in as a baby. As he got older, he eventually started to regret his past decisions. And when he reached a point where he had no family to rely on, he knew that Carmen was also in the same predicament. Her situation arguably worse since it wasn't even her choice. And as I've been getting older, you learn how important family really is. There's a big push in America to go no contact with your parents if they're being cruel. And in lots of situations that is justified, don't get me wrong. Luckily for me, my mom and dad have always actually loved me and my sister. They definitely could have been better in a lot of areas, but you know what parent couldn't? As I've gotten older, I realize that they are sincerely trying to do what's right. And so long as, they want to be better, then I'm willing to struggle through them during the uncomfortable growth with them. Now, me and my parents are actually in a really good spot, regardless of how much I like to shit talk them on my channel. Some of you may know about my time with having to help take care of my granny during COVID when she was suffering from dementia and Alzheimer's, until she eventually passed away. My dad often tells me the worst feeling that he has is every once in a while he'll remember that, I need to call my parents. And he grabs the phone only to remember they're both gone, realizing that he just can't anymore. I make a lot of jokes about how my parents, specifically my dad, can be major assholes at times, but I just want to clear the air that for as much as I talk shit about them, they have also equally done good as much bad, if not more good. And it's taken a long time, but I can actually say that I'm at a point where I actually feel loved by my parents. A lot of the reason why I never felt loved is largely because I also didn't want to feel loved by them, which only made things harder for everyone. I don't think you understand how much angst I had growing up. So watching this show, especially this season, is a little hard for me because I often think about how if I never matured and if my parents never settled their squabbles, I could have been in a similar situation. And for all the people who are in this situation and are thinking of going no contact with your parents, I'm so sorry. It's so hard. My mom grew up with a very tight-knit family because she didn't really grow up with all that much money. And my dad and me thought sacrificing yourself for your family was stupid. Your family shouldn't hold you back if they're being too much. However, my mom's mom, my nanny, ended up almost homeless several times after giving almost all of her money to scam callers. So my mom spent years fighting for power of attorney over her mom. And I kept trying to convince my mom to just drop it all together and leave Nani and to get what she deserves. I also wasn't fully aware my Nani was also having to deal with dementia. I think dementia, not Alzheimer's. There's a difference. I'm used to them being one and the same, but there is a difference. Now I feel so bad for that, saying all that. I was mean to my mom. And my dad eventually admitted that my mom was right. Sacrificing yourself and your time for your family isn't stupid. Admit, my dad is stubborn. I can count on one hand the amount of times he has admitted he's wrong. A lot of people think that survival of the fittest is the law of nature, but the way humans have managed to reach the top of the food chain is by taking care of each other. We take care of our sick. The strong protect the weak. Now I understand why Japan has such an emphasis on family in their culture. The thing that will really help you out when you're struggling isn't the government, and it's not God, it's family. Whether it be by blood or by bond, I really hope you guys manage to find a family. Okay, existential monologue aside, Carmen decides they need a headquarters. Also, now we're getting the backstory for Zach and Ivy. This season loves to do backstories. I can't blame them. Backstories have proven to be an effective method to deepen the audience's relationship with a character. You introduce them as they are and introduce their backstory later. It works largely because the majority of people we meet, we don't know their history until we ask for the information or the information is given to us. Most people's backstory in real life isn't usually deep and tragic, but we all have a backstory. Evil organizations are all over history. First Vile, then the Yakuza, now the mob, which is how Zack and Ivy got tangled into crime, needed to pay back their loan shark for a botched race. I love this approach. The history of crime syndicates works too well not to have it in this show, and we all love committing crimes. I love it, watching crime shows. Anyway, they were doing a job. Turns out it wasn't the mob, it was Vile. They get tangled up with Carmen, and Zack and Ivy aren't that important to the story, so you can figure out the rest.
Heck, we can buy a whole fleet of cars!
You're turning to crime to fix a car.
I'll race her.
Couldn't you get a loan from a family member?
Hey, could you loan me some?
Never mind. We're the only family we've got.
I'm getting strong Batman vibes for how many orphans are in this story. Season 2 is an elevation with the storytelling, now tying in multiple characters and their backgrounds to the primary story, creating more complexity and depth to the motives and relations behind the characters and crimes being committed. Zack and Ivy were flat comedy relief, but now that their past expertise with racing is coming in handy and showcasing their flaws with how they let their personal conflicts get in the way of the job, they have a chance to grow. Now the only character that is horribly flat is Player. The luxury of animation is that you can do complex scenes with a lower budget than if it were live action. You can get fast and furious car action with nothing more than a writer, storyboard artists, and animators. It's honestly baffling how live action is so heavily revered over animation when animation allows for so much with a lot less. The creativity when it comes to how they tackle getting around defenses is actually blowing my mind. Like, getting Gray to operate the lighting of a ballet when in actuality he's controlling the electric defense fields that Carmen needs to get around. It's like a video game. Best part is, they can't just turn off the power or the building goes into lockdown, so this was really their best bet. It makes you wonder how the creators came up with an idea like this. At this point, mystery spy thrillers are closer to science fiction than any other genre with how creative they need to get. Gray eventually catches on to something fishy when the recording stopped, and now he's at risk of getting all his memories back about his old crime history, something Carmen is desperately trying to keep from happening.
Lights out, Auckland.
So, how did you know how to sabotage that device?
It just felt very familiar.
This surveillance was obtained less than an hour ago.
Find out everything you can about Carmen's friend.
Oh, finally. Maybe Acme will contribute to the plot instead of just padding time. The plot doesn't really change if you cut out all of Acme up until now. Ivy, they really go the extra mile by having the team split up. And Ivy having to go solo to steal nuclear launch codes from the bad guys, and Carmen is in a heap of trouble with Acme tailing her, having no choice but to rely on them for help when she has no way to communicate with her team.
We can take you to a hospital, or you can ride with your friends. Consider it a gesture of goodwill.
Friends.
Keep it. You never know when you may need to reach me.
Jeez, you know, this show is so cinematic sometimes. Sometimes it pays to be a film bro. As insufferable as a lot of them are, they do a great job making visual sequences hold your attention. Vile understands they don't have the upper hand anymore, so they're relocating their home base, and priority number 1 is tracking down Carmen. Now that Carmen is recovering from being caught in the cold, Shadowsan is taking over primary operation, which makes sense since he was already doing his own thing, but how long has Carmen been out? They make it seem like she's been in a coma while Shadow is off in like 3 different missions. The Inspector is still part of this story somehow, and he's doing his own detective work trying to capture Carmen. Still, this guy has an unhealthy obsession, Bat. He's literally this image.
But what does it mean? I'm better at thinking with my fists than with my head. What would Julia think?
Whoa, was that growth?
What made you change your tune about him?
When Shadowsan wasn't nursing you back to health, he was stepping up in the field.
How old are you? Don't you have school? I know Player isn't supposed to be a character, but he really is. And this is kind of driving me crazy. We all knew Carmen would start working with Acme. It was obvious.
Get everyone out now.
Okay, I hate when they do this. He tripped, yes, but he didn't break an ankle or anything. He shouldn't need help getting back up. It would take more time for Carmen to help him up than him just getting up on his own. They want Carmen to look tough and heroic, but this just ain't it. And if it was this easy to capture Carmen, why didn't they do this forever ago?
He was on a caper. Vile sent him there to steal something.
We sent Shadowsan to Buenos Aires, Argentina 20 years ago to steal your daddy's life.
No, you're lying.
Yeah, she is lying. I would trust Shadow more than her. It's obvious she's just trying to divide the house. And then she just leaves because we can't actually murder anyone.
You're risking your neck on the word of Coach Brunt without even trying to talk to Shadowsan?
I'll learn what there is to know about my family. All on my own.
This is dumb. Carmen is being dumb. I get family is the whole point of the show, but stopping the world's biggest crime syndicate is also part of this show.
Red, what is it?
It's gone.
Did they take the land it was on too? How did they do that? You really can move mountains with enough resources.
Scrub it.
Oh. I guess with enough dynamite, you really can move mountains. But not enough dynamite in the world can work against plot convenience, and the Inspector is back to being comedy relief. Unless they wanted her to find it because the hard drive says Shadowsan was sent to take out someone named Dexter Wolf, someone who was on the council for Vile and betrayed them. Then Shadowsan just tells her everything. Talking? Something she could have done in the first place? Wow, regardless of wasting our time, turns out it's all true. Dexter wanted to jump ship from Vile. Shadowsan was tasked to take him out. Big shocker, he wanted to defect from Vile to raise his daughter. Conveniently, it wasn't Shadow who killed Wolf. The cops were on to him, and they busted him. Oh wow, the Russian doll finally ties in. The real murderer is the chief of Acme. Gasp, plot twist. So things are still complicated, but the house isn't divided. Shadowsan was a hero because we can't complicate things too much, you know? That would mean we would have to drag the show on for like 14 seasons and it would wither away without any interest at all. Take notes, everyone, because this is how real hacking works. Carmen leaves a hard drive for the head of Acme. She takes it, plugs it in without a second thought, and now she's hacked. You'd be shocked how often this works. If you find a USB stick out in the wild, don't plug it into your computer.
Shadowsan's story checks out. Tamara Fraser is on record taking responsibility for Wolf's death. They never realized anyone else, including you, was present.
The actual homeowner succumbed to a terminal illness, Vera Cruz.
I need some film bros to help me here. Turns out Carmen's dad faked her mom's death, so her mom is still alive. And what movie are they referencing here? The airplane, the iconic femme fatale, I've seen it before, but I can't figure out what movie it's from, and it's driving me crazy. The worst part is that AI images on Google are making this so much harder to find. There's just so much garbage. Like, I know what it looks like in my brain, and oftentimes I'll just type in enough keywords into Google Images and be able to find it, and that's not happening. I can't type in enough keywords to actually find what I need because there's just so much AI. AI is gonna be a major roadblock with research, more than it already is. AI is like the atom bomb. It is a revolutionary bit of technology that is devastating and forever changes the world, and you can't take it back. You were so focused on if you could, you didn't think about if you should. Not as if we have a billion movies and stories telling us why this is bad. And I follow a lot of artists online. A lot of them. And so I've seen that there's AI models for children. Now, keep in mind, not like anime lolly. I mean like it's still illustrated, but clearly modeled after real children. Do you see the problem? I've reported so many accounts when I stumble across AI art that looks like this because we know what you're doing. We know what you're really trying to achieve. We know that it's just a signal to all the other sick fucks out there that you're one of the bad ones. This is also a tool for so many bad people. What future did they think they would get by creating these AI models, these algorithms? Like, I see the benefit, don't get me wrong, but does it really outweigh the negatives? I mean, don't get me started on the whole like Shadowsan thing. If you guys know that artist who was drawing like depictions of real people in order to like get back at Keemstar, that was a whole thing. Now what we have is far worse with deepfakes. Every single internet personality out there is at risk of being deepfaked because so much reference of us is on the internet. Do you see why I'm personally scared? I'm doing my damnedest to keep my reputation on the internet squeaky clean, but when AI gets good enough, someone else could just decide to ruin it. Just a matter of time before some sick freak just decides they hate me for either a reason or no reason. With AI on the rise, it's becoming more and more appealing to be permanently offline. And don't get me wrong, I don't agree with having to fork over your ID to watch, but I understand why. It's to help fight the deepfake problem. I get the logic behind it. The moment the chronically online can't differentiate between what's real and what's fiction, then everything is true and nothing is permitted. Yes, I just quoted Assassin's Creed. This script is all over the place. I'm so sorry, I'm going on a rant. Haven't been able to talk about this with anyone and I'm scared. Let's get back to Carmen Sandiego. The Inspector is back in Acme, and that's the end of season 2. Whoop-de-doo! I'm still fuming. Season 3 and 4 are significantly less episodes than the previous seasons, which tells me we're hard focusing on plot from this point on. Vile is now in Scotland.
I had Little Red Robin Hood dead to rights on that train in Botswana, and you made me let her walk!
I appreciate that. The writers know that murdering would be the obvious, easy solution. I'm glad they lampshaded it.
I have never seen the man in the photograph, though I have been known to make men tremble.
She sure is making me tremble.
With fear.
Funny enough, I'm into that too. Julia is leaving Acme. Jeez, I didn't realize being a super secret spy has a high turnover rate. You know how I said season 3 and 4 would be nothing but progressing the plot? Yeah, I was wrong. Turns out we started continuing the hunt for Carmen's mom, and now we're doing her typical crime-busting Robin Hood thing. I feel like this season is more of just a reason to put everyone in costumes. The problem now is that a lot of the show was being driven by the mystery of Carmen's past, and the plot twists that occurred with Shadow, now that Well's running nearly dry. We have one nice drink left, and that last drink is Carmen's mom. So we're seeing them delay that reveal in order to keep the people watching. Not only that, but Vile isn't really that big of a threat anymore. They even go out of their way to make Vile operatives look like a joke, and Acme, that being exclusively the Inspector, is still just comedy relief. So the primary conflict with the crime syndicate and the investigative bureau is largely gone. So what is there to really keep the people watching other than the dangling carrot they refuse to let us eat? Vile is setting up Carmen to make her believe they plan on stealing Britain's crown jewels. And that was the Vulcan nerve pinch. You'll see that a lot in movies. It's not real. It was all a ploy to get her caught, making it look like she's the one there to steal the crown jewels for herself. They use her own method against her. Now it's an easy walk in to investigate the damage, and they just replace the crown jewels with a fake. This time, Vile wins.
You may want to mind the gap.
This is the London police. You are under arrest.
Plummet to your doom or surrender to the authorities. Which would, of course, be no different than surrendering to Vile.
I keep trying to tell you, you can't trust the cops. You know what they say, tell the cops nothing, tell your lawyer and paramedics everything. That would have been an awesome way to end the season, but nope, turns out they were always one step ahead of them, seeing the trap and choosing to spring it so that they could capture Vile's new head honcho.
You assumed that you were operating from Shadow, but we were watching. And we shared your crime with the rest of the world.
Inspector has slowly been adopting Julia's mindset of Carmen actually being a good guy, and technically speaking, that's the only notable thing that's happened this season. You know, all things considered, you can technically skip season 4, and you wouldn't really have missed anything significant. We're now seeing the pitfalls of long mystery shows, and there's a lot of pitfalls with long mystery shows. Eventually, there's so many layers to how much I thought that you would think I thought, but I knew you'd think, because the moment there's so many layers of that, it becomes just ridiculous. When there's maybe 3 layers at most, it's believable. But when you add more than that, it's our suspension of disbelief just starts to fall. Death Note sort of kind of had this problem sometimes, but not like quite enough. They verged on the edge. They pushed the envelope quite a lot with Death Note. No, not throwing shade on Death Note. I still love Death Note. Acme decides to try and recruit Gray, hoping that maybe they'll eventually jog his memory. During a mission that didn't entirely go their way, Shadowsan is out of commission.
There's something I need to tell you, Red. Mom and Dad decided I spend way too much time alone in my room, which means goodbye homeschool and hello public school.
Finally, Player is getting some spotlight.
Sorry about you on your first day of school, Player.
He's Canadian? And he's gay? And he's Canadian?
Now,
This silly one does not interest me, Hugo. She is the pistachio I wish to crack. Do you want to fight?
I cannot begin to describe how turned on I am. Acme manages to revive Gray's memories of when he was an operative at Vile, basically unlocking a sleeper agent. I don't know how they thought this would go, but then again, I don't think they really knew he was part of Vile. Gray is having the problem of jumping back and forth between his evil spy persona and his friendly Kiwi persona, which leads him to get arrested while caught randomly stealing from a local. Vile manages to get Gray before Carmen. They are at a major disadvantage without Player, so they jump in and get him an immediate doctor's note. Vile is attempting to coerce Gray into becoming an operative again, given that everyone they've thrown at Carmen hasn't worked, and Gray is probably their best bet. Also, they're so desperate for good operatives that they're creating a robot army.
Gray?
The name is... It's Crackle.
Wow, Rice Krispie Treats has really changed since the last time I've seen it.
But I'm begging you, give up trying to stop us. Because I don't ever want to be put in a position to hurt you again.
Remember what I said about dynamite and mountains? Well, yeah, you get it. Are we just abandoning Carmen finding her mom? What happened to that? Were we just supposed to accept that she could be anywhere? Don't know what to do now, guys. Was that the end of that?
Actually, today was my last day. My parents totally freaked when they heard about my school's bug problem. They decided homeschooling was safer.
Well, that didn't last long. I hate when shows do this. They introduce an interesting dilemma that lasts just one season, or worse, one episode, and then everything's just reverted back. It's just reversed back to what it was, and then everything's normal again. It's like the writers are afraid to take chances. It feels like things aren't progressing. Shadowsan is better again. Everything eventually just gets reversed. I expected him to eventually heal, but this still counts. Carmen tells the head of Acme that she's the baby of the man she killed, and says if Acme finds her mom, she'll trade Vile info. Took long enough. I was wondering when they'd do this, And then she gets kidnapped by Vile again. Jules is back again and put in charge of figuring out who Carmen's mom is. Brainwash time. Now she's working for the bad guys. Now she's losing all good faith with Acme. They even promote her to one of the main 5. Wow, guys.
We knew your father, Dexter Wolf.
He, in fact, held this very seat beside us.
Until the traitor Shadowsan went and stole his life.
Thanks to Jules, Acme figured out where Carmen's mom is in Argentina. If only they had any way of telling Carmen that news. Carmen may have been programmed to lose all empathy, but not Gray. He offers to be arrested by Acme to explain that Carmen has been brainwashed. Acme is the only people that can restore her memories just like they did with Gray. A simple bait, trap, and Carmen gets her memories back with the super fancy doohickey thing. At least we hope. If the process was slow for Gray, it's slow for her too. She still believes Vile and pretty much kills Gray before she could get her memories back. Like a John Wick movie, we got a one-on-one between Carmen and Shadowsan. But her childhood toy brings back all the memories back, and everything is okay now except for Gray being dead. But whatever. Now Carmen knows Vile's headquarters, tells Acme, and they launch a full-scale invasion. Good guys win. You would think they'd have an escape method planned out better. Everything backfired. Don't worry about Gray. People aren't allowed to die in this show. Gotta keep the ratings appropriate for kids. Shadowsan gives her the file that has all the information about her past, her real name, her parents.
Shadowsan? What's it say?
Keep fighting the good fight. Love you both so much. Carmen.
And Carmen finally meets her mom. And then it was canceled. You can clearly tell they had to make a beeline to the finish because the show was cut. But hey, you guys expected that? It's Netflix. Canceling shows is like their hobby. And the construction of this show was so smart. They made sure Carmen belonged to nowhere so that she could belong to everywhere, and that means everyone can connect to her. Oh wait, they can't. They keep reversing everything they do in the seasons. Like every big dilemma that they do, they reverse it because they don't know when they're gonna get canceled. Everything needs to be tied up as much as they can in one season so that we're not left on a massive cliffhanger that never gets resolved. Streaming services have probably fundamentally changed how writers approach writing animated series. Oh, I'm uncomfortable. Other than that, I'm shocked this show was not getting more coverage. This was an impressive show, rushed ending aside. Honestly, I'm just really appreciative that they gave us an ending at all, and a decently satisfying one at that. I can imagine they had like 2 or 3 ideas of different endings that they could just whip out at any time in case they got the news that the show was canceled. Thank you guys so much for suggesting I cover this show. You can follow me on Blue Sky and Instagram, and also I have a Patreon if you like throwing me money. I hope you enjoy this video. Stay beautiful and keep playing